Hi everybody, Dave here from More Style Tarot, or at least I have my More Style Tarot hat on today. The other day I had an idea that came to me with regards to blending of a little bit of astrology with tarot, and it was with regards to the Major Arcana. So if you've looked at some of my videos on my website before, you've seen that I've kind of defined this progression of spiritual growth or understanding that the Fool would go through the Major Arcana. And just the other day, I saw a video online where somebody was talking about doing tarot, and the idea popped into my head that the Major Arcana might be aligned to the house system in astrology. And so if you have a tarot deck, get your tarot deck, pause the video, and go through and pull out all the Major Arcana cards and then lay them out in 2 rows. So start from the Fool, come across to the Hermit card, place the Wheel of Fortune on the end, and then from Justice across to Judgment, and then place the World on the end. So basically it's 2 rows with a card on either end. And then basically what I was going to do is I was going to share with you kind of my interpretation of how these cards fit into the different quadrants around the wheel. And so if you're not familiar with an astrology wheel, here's a wheel on the screen. Basically, generally everybody starts from Aries and wraps around to Pisces. And the wheel is carved up into 4 quadrants. One would be the self and identity, which would be Aries through Gemini. Cancer through Virgo is still within the self, but figuring out how to interact with others and taking care of yourself. Going from Libra to Sagittarius is more of that desire of interacting with others, going out and being in situations where there's other people's emotions involved and learning and basically sharing and learning from other people. From Capricorn to Pisces is more of that area of where you work, how you, what your goals are, what your legacy is, where you shine, and then how you digest and figure things out to move on to the next cycle. And so on my website, I have different keywords. So down on the bottom right of the website, I have house keywords and house cycle. So I talk about this in the house cycle. I put that up a long time ago. But here we also have keywords. So when you look at these 4 different sections, we have keywords that go along with that. So without much more background, I'm just going to jump into this and see if you can relate to what I'm saying here. So I take it you've already laid out the cards in front of you. And what we have here is we have the Fool as being that first place in the chart. It becomes the place of identity, which falls right into that first house of Aries in the chart. That second, so when you get through that first house, as you start getting into the second house, you have to be motivated. There has to be some desire. There has to be some manifestation. If you heard how I've talked about the magician fits right in there as that connection between what you want to do and what you do. So you have to create that thought. You have to create your desire, or you have to imagine a desire to move on. You have to be able to get into the cycle of things. And then we move into the High Priestess, the Empress, and the Emperor. So now you move into these couple of cards there where basically the High Priestess, when I think about in relations to the houses, I almost want to put the High Priestess on the other side of the Emperor. So we drop into the Empress and the Emperor. These are, the Empress is that tactile sense of the earth. It is, if you've seen the definition of my cards, it's basically the natural laws of things. When you plant a wheat seed, you get a wheat plant. So here it is, when we go through that second house, we learn to figure out how things interact and what is valuable to us. As we get into that third house, we're starting to educate ourselves into what we do and how we do that. The Emperor falls right in there because the Emperor, as I've defined it, is that cause and effect functionality in the cards. So we have that Emperor that is, when you do things, you expect a particular reaction to happen. So as we fill out that first house, or that first quadrant of the astrology 3 houses, we kind of develop the self. We'd start with the identity of the Fool. We create a desire. The Empress, I'd kind of move on to the end of that because she has 2 pillars in the cards. If you look at the classic cards, we have the pillars there, and we have the pillars from the Hierophant. And what happens is they both kind of support the bottom of the astrology wheel. So it would end up down in Gemini and Cancer. And so when you look at the high priestess is the intuitive understanding. It is knowing something. And so when you throw that into the first house, there's a lot of people that when they're teaching themselves, they come from an instinctual background. They just know that it is a particular way. And so it fits right in there. Whether it's in that third position or fifth position, to me, it's all fine because it all drops into that first quadrant of the first three houses. Moving into 4, 5, and 6. So when we look at 4, 5, and 6, we have the Hierophant, the Lovers, the Chariot, Strength, and Hermit. So these particular cards, when you look at that first part of the fourth house, where you're looking at the family, authority, you're looking at how you interact with the more authoritative figures in your life, so your mother and your father. And the Hierophant kind of fits into that realm because it's about the wisdom of others. It's about the wisdom of others, you researching what they've discovered to be able to incorporate that into your life. The Lovers and the Chariot are a little bit more, they fall kind of the end of the fourth and into the fifth house, where we take our risks, how we want to get noticed, what we do with regards to drawing attention to ourselves or jumping out to experience things. And so the Lover card and the Chariot card are two cards that, have you seen from previous videos that I've done about those two cards, those are cards of choice. You can either choose to act from your heart or you can choose to act from your mind. Thus, they fall right in here, and they're very immature energies. They fall into that early discovery, that early process of reaching out to see what we can do. So that's kind of in that fourth and fifth house. We look at, in the end of the fifth house, we start to get a little bit more mature energy, and so we draw into Strength, and we get into Virgo, which draws into the Hermit card. That Hermit card is the acts of doing things for yourself, self-rule. It is doing that activity on a daily basis. It is taking care of yourself. The Strength card is almost more the Leo energy, which kind of falls into the fifth house. And so, of course, they've got the lion on the card, the classic case of having a lion there. And so we kind of round out those first two quadrants where the energies of the cards really kind of intuitively fit into those quadrants. They overlap a little bit. As you can see, I have 5 cards for each one of the quadrants. When we get to the Descendant is where we drop in the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune, in the classic case, is that spinning wheel. You're going to be lifted up and lifted down. For the Wheel of Fortune, it is fate or it is destiny. Fate or destiny or hope or abundance. And so basically it's that turning point in the chart. And as we know, the Descendant is a turning point between how we develop ourselves to how we start to interact with others. And so when we look into that, the first thing we find in that other house, so I'll scroll the cards up a little bit more here. The first thing we find there is Justice. Justice is in that Libra energy, so it's right at home there. It fits perfectly in that position of the 7th house, which is that first little bit that you have to be able to do to interact with others, is you kind of have to follow the rule sets. The Hangman and Death. So when you look at the Hangman is a social interaction card. It is sacrificing for others. It is putting the others ahead of you. It is looking at what you can do for others to help benefit society. And then you fit Death right into that right after that, where everybody knows that the 8th house is about death and rebirth. It's about that transformation. It's about the things in life that you have no control over. This card has a perfect placement there. Just like Justice had the perfect placement for the 7th house, Death has the perfect placement for the 8th house. And then right after that, right after you get through the deeper aspects of the 8th house, you start to work your way into the 9th house. And the 9th house, what's interesting about the cards here is that we kind of have this overlap. So we look at the top part of the chart as the midheaven. Midheaven in astrology, it's all about what you do, how you do things, what you shine in life. It's that work that you do on a daily basis. And so for the cards, we have 3 cards that fit into that area. And if you've seen previous interpretations of my cards, you'll know that those 3 cards, Temperance, the Devil, and the Tower, are the 3 cards about the practices that we do in life. It is about what we do and practicing the art and doing the things in life to interact. So we can choose to interact with the heart. We can choose to do things of the heart. We can practice the understanding the emotions. We can deal with the body. We can deal with the flesh. We can deal with the physical aspects. We can deal with the animalistic aspects of life. Or we can deal with the ego, which would be in the tower. It can be about how we build things, how we think that we can do these amazing things. But all three of these cards fit right up in the top through the 9th house into the 10th house, which represents how we learn, how we interact, and how we, the energy that we put towards our work, what we want to kind of accomplish, which would roll over into the 10th house. And so that third quadrant of the 7th, 8th, and 9th has rules of interactions. It goes through things that are outside of our control into the start of what we're really wanting to practice, what we want to do in life. And, you know, when I think about those three cards at the top, there's a little bit of confusion when you look at the symbology on each one of those. They could be slightly differently arranged. But here, I'll just go with the typical numbers that you see on any classic card. As you roll over a little bit farther into the end of the 10th house, you find that we move away from the three practices and we get to our individual identity. And when we get to our individual identity of the hope card, then this is where our hopes and dreams are. So when people look into the 10th house, they start seeing or 11th house, they start saying, well, this is kind of where your hopes and dreams are. This is where you want to have your legacy in life. This is where the types of things that drive you to do what you do. And what do we find there? We find the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon, both of these cards, the sun as being how we find emotional satisfaction, and the moon as being the emotional satisfaction. The sun as being the outwardly projection of how we are, what we do in life. It is the energy that we expose into life. It's how we channel our energy. And they both fit into that legacy. So how do we want to be remembered could be an attribute of that sun. And then as we get a little bit deeper into that, now we've gone past where we kind of would naturally complete things. And we get to the point where we now have to digest it. And so here, that judgment card fits right in at the end, showing that it's the end of the cycle. We've come to the end. We now need to remember what we've done. We're going to digest what we've done. The death card has that rebirth out of the coffins. It is that point of judgment of knowing that you've done this cycle. And then at the very end, we come to the ascendant, which is going to be the world. And what's interesting, the world is a card of conscious understanding. It is, we've gone through the cards, we've gone through the cycle, and we now understand what it is that we were doing. And then if you look at these cards a little bit deeper, so kind of sum it up, 13 minutes, it's like this is, it's a very loose interpretation of the house placement, but it seems to kind of fit with the cards, provided that you take the world and the Wheel of Fortune, and you kind of put them on the ascendant locations and the descendant locations. And what's also interesting is that when you look at these cards, these particular cards, both of them have 4 items. They have the 4 items in it that represent the elemental aspects that we go through for all of the cards. Both of them have circles on them, showing that we're in this cycle. Let's see, there's other similarities that you'd see in these cards too. So, for instance, you would find that there's the, what would you call it? The opposition lines in the charts. So when you look at this, you have the ascendant line, which is horizontal. You have the vertical line with the MCIC line, which is what you do outwardly and what you do inwardly. But all throughout this chart, you can have opposite lines. So you would have the Aries and Virgo alignments. So we have Aries as being that first start, and we have Virgo as being justice, that fall into their alignments. Characteristics seem to fit. We have, let's see, what I want to go to. We could look at the High Priestess and having an opposite as being death. What's interesting is that there's mythology that goes along with that. High Priestess having gone to hell and come back, and death being the gatekeeper. And then we look at it too and see that we have the Empress and Temperance that would be at opposite points in the chart. One would be physical, one would be emotional. We could have the Emperor, we'd have the Hierophant and the Emperor on the bottom. We have the Devil and the Tower on the top. These could be that the information of the wise could go into that aspect of the tower. What we've learned from the past, we're able to make the tower better. We're able to create things based upon what other people have done. The Emperor, cause and effect, which is a physical attribute. We look at the Lovers card and Hope as being, what's interesting is that we have a sun element here, which also transpires up into the sun element in that quadrant. We normally have too Sunny Strength card, which would align to a sun card. The Chariot, as in my cards, has a moon on it, and it's opposite of the moon. And so it's just interesting that it took me this long to make this particular arrangement. And so the way that I would see this for doing a tarot card reading is that these cards would have a deeper meaning if you bring in the astrology house placement to go with them. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to say about the Major Arcana with regards to the house placement. If you have an understanding that goes along with this, that might be able to complement this or criticize this, feel free to let me know. Put it in the comment section. I'm sure I'll get an email about it. But anyway, just wanted to put this idea out there, share it with the world, and I will talk to you later.